Now that you have a clear understanding of the Scrum principle of collaboration, I'm going to discuss another important concept called value-based prioritization. The Scrum framework is driven by the goal of delivering maximum business value in a minimum time span. One of the most effective tools for delivering the greatest value in the shortest amount of time is prioritization. Prioritizing can be defined as determining the order and demarcating between what must be done now and what needs to be done later. The concept of prioritization isn't new to project management. The traditional waterfall model of project management proposes using multiple task prioritization tools. Is prioritization an integral concept in Scrum? From the project manager's point of view, prioritization is integral because certain tasks must be accomplished first to expedite the development process and achieve the project goals. Some of the traditional techniques of task prioritization include setting deadlines for delegated tasks and using prioritization matrices. Now I'll take you through another crucial concept, value-based prioritization. Scrum, however, uses value-based prioritization as one of the core principles that drives the structure and functionality of the entire Scrum framework. This concept helps projects benefit through adaptability and iterative development of the product or service. More significantly, Scrum aims at delivering a valuable product or service to the customer on an early and continuous basis. So who handles prioritization? The product owner prioritizes user stories in the prioritized product backlog. The prioritized product backlog contains a list of all the requirements needed to bring the project to fruition. Once the product owner has received the business requirements from the customer and written these down in the form of workable user stories, he or she works with the customer and sponsor to understand which business requirements provide maximum business value. The product owner must understand what the customer wants and values in order to arrange the prioritized product backlog items, or the user stories, by relative importance. Sometimes a customer may insist that all user stories are of high priority. While this might be true, even a list of high priority user stories should be prioritized within the list itself. Prioritizing a backlog involves determining how critical each user story is. High-value requirements are identified and moved to the top of the prioritized product backlog. The processes in which the principle of value-based prioritization is put into practice are create prioritized product backlog and groom prioritized product backlog. The product owner's work doesn't end here. He or she simultaneously works with the Scrum team to understand the project risks and uncertainty, as they may have negative consequences associated with them. This should be taken into account while prioritizing user stories on a value-based approach. Refer to the risk chapter for more information on this. The Scrum team also alerts the product owner of any dependencies that arise out of implementation. These dependencies must be taken into account during prioritization. Prioritization may be based on a subjective estimate of the projected business value or profitability, or it can be based on results and analysis of the market using tools including, but not limited to, customer interviews, surveys, and financial models and analytical techniques. The product owner has to translate the inputs and needs of the project stakeholders to create the prioritized product backlog. That way, while prioritizing the user stories in the prioritized product backlog, three factors are considered: value, risk or uncertainty, and dependencies. Thus, prioritization results in deliverables that satisfy the requirements of the customer with the objective of delivering the maximum business value in the least amount of time. And with that, we conclude this session on the Scrum principle of value-based prioritization. I look forward to seeing you in the next session on the Scrum principle of time boxing. Thank you for learning with us.
Hello, and welcome back to our Scrum Study course on a guide to the Scrum body of knowledge. We have just finished learning about the value-based prioritization as a Scrum principle. In this section, we're going to learn what time boxing is and why it is so critical to the Scrum methodology. Scrum treats time as one of the most important constraints in managing a project. To address the constraints of time, Scrum uses a concept called time boxing, in which a certain amount of time is allocated for each process and activity in a Scrum project. This ensures that Scrum team members do not self-align too much or too little work for a particular period of time and do not expend their time and energy on work for which they have little clarity. Some of the advantages of time boxing are efficient development process, less overheads, high velocity for teams. Time boxing is utilized in many Scrum processes. For example, in the Conduct Daily Stand-Up process, the duration of the daily stand-up meeting is time-boxed to 15 minutes. This gives everyone just enough time to give 3 pieces of critical information and no more. What have I done since the last meeting? What do I plan to do before the next meeting? And what impediments or obstacles, if any, am I currently facing? If a team knows they should be offering this and only this information, then the meeting is unlikely to run longer due to time-draining digressions. Time boxing is also useful in avoiding excess improvement or gold plating of an item. One note of caution. Arbitrary time boxing can lead to demotivation of the team and may have the consequence of creating an apprehensive environment, so it should be used appropriately. Let's look more specifically at how time boxing is applied in Scrum. First, a sprint is a time-boxed iteration lasting 1 to 6 weeks, during which the Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and shields the Scrum team from both internal and external impediments. This aids in avoiding vision creep that could affect the sprint goal. During this time, the team works to convert the requirements in the prioritized product backlog into shippable product functionalities. To get maximum benefits from a Scrum project, it is always recommended to keep the sprint time box to 4 weeks, unless there are projects with very stable requirements, where sprints can extend up to 6 weeks. Second, the daily stand-up meeting, which is time boxed to 15 minutes. The team members gather to report the progress of the project by answering the following 3 questions. What have I done since the last meeting? What do I plan to do before the next meeting? And what impediments or obstacles, if any, am I currently facing? This meeting is carried out by the team as part of the Conduct Daily Stand-Up process. Next is the Sprint Planning Meeting. This meeting is conducted prior to the sprint as part of the Plan and Estimate phase. It is time-boxed to 8 hours for a 1-month sprint. The Sprint Planning Meeting is divided into 2 parts. Objective definition. During the first half of the meeting, the product owner explains the highest priority user stories or requirements in the prioritized product backlog to the Scrum team. The Scrum team, in collaboration with the product owner, then defines the sprint goal. Task estimation. During the second half of the meeting, the Scrum team decides how to complete the selected prioritized product backlog items to fulfill the sprint goal. In this context, sprint planning meetings are also conducted during the Identify Task process to identify tasks and during Estimate Task process to estimate identified tasks. While the sprint planning meeting is conducted before the sprint review meeting is conducted after the sprint. It is time-boxed to 4 hours for a 1-month sprint. During the sprint review meeting that is conducted in the Demonstrate and Validate sprint process, the Scrum team presents the deliverables of the current sprint to the product owner. The product owner reviews the product or product increment against the agreed-upon acceptance criteria and either accepts or rejects the completed user stories. Retrospect Sprint Meeting. The Retrospect Sprint Meeting is time-boxed to 4 hours for a 1-month sprint and is conducted as part of the Retrospect Sprint process. During this meeting, the Scrum team gets together to review and reflect on the previous sprint in terms of the processes followed, tools employed, collaboration and communication mechanisms, and other aspects relevant to the project. The team discusses what went well during the previous sprint and what did not go well, the goal being to learn and make improvements in the sprints that follow. Some improvement opportunities or best practices from this meeting could also be updated as part of the Scrum Guidance Body documents. This brings us to the end of our session on the Scrum principles of time boxing, and thank you for learning with us.
Hello and welcome back to Scrum Study. So far, we've discussed the 6 principles that guide Scrum. Have you ever wondered why Scrum is becoming more popular with every passing day? Well, in many ways, Scrum is better than the traditional project management methods. Let's consider in detail some of these differences between Scrum and traditional project management models. The main difference is the way in which projects are handled. The emphasis in traditional project management is to conduct detailed upfront planning for the project with emphasis on fixing the scope, cost, and schedule and managing those parameters. Traditional project management may at times lead to a situation where the plan has succeeded, yet the customer isn't satisfied. Scrum encourages data-based iterative decisions over the detailed upfront planning practiced in traditional waterfall-style project management. The focus isn't on meeting the project plan's targets, but on satisfying customer requirements. Traditional project management can lead to a situation where the plan has succeeded, yet the customer isn't satisfied. In addition to iterative planning and delivery, Scrum supports the collaboration of all parties involved, be it the customer, business team, or technical team, to minimize risk and achieve satisfaction. Scrum is often contrasted with the other linear fashion project methods because of the low upfront planning and scheduling of activities that are followed by execution. The Scrum framework is founded on the belief that the knowledge workers of today can offer much more than just their technical expertise, and that trying to fully map out and plan for an ever-changing environment isn't efficient. Therefore, Scrum encourages data-based, iterative decision-making. In Scrum, the primary focus is on delivering products that satisfy customer requirements in small, iterative, shippable increments. To deliver the greatest amount of value in the shortest amount of time, Scrum promotes prioritization and time boxing over fixing the scope, cost, and schedule of a project. An important feature of Scrum is self-organization, which allows the individuals who are actually doing the work to estimate and take ownership of tasks. We can conclude this segment by saying that all in all, Scrum is an updated theory for managing any type of project, suited to our time and age, ready to replace the traditional project management techniques that were created in and for a bygone era. And with that, we come to the end of this session on Scrum versus traditional project management methods. And this marks the end of our module on the principles of Scrum as presented in A Guide to the Scrum Body of Knowledge. We at Scrum Study look forward to seeing you in more of our informational videos. Until then, thank you for learning with us.